Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and yes, as I teased in the last review, Pixar's first ever prequel film, all about monsters going to college. That's right, I'm reviewing Monsters University. Yes, I love Monsters University, and it really seems like that Monsters University is unappreciated and it's underrated, stuff like that. I mean, come on. People expected that when a new Monsters Inc. film was happening, they thought that it would continue the story and we would see Boo, but come on. Monsters Inc. is not just about Boo, okay? I just thought I'd point that out and just make it clear. But it's interesting to, know the story on how Mike and Sully first met. And, it had been mentioned a couple of times of them going to school, going to college, and the fact that this movie pays homage to one line that Mike said in the first Monsters, Inc. film. "You've been jealous by my looks since the 4th grade, pal." Yeah, that line. So anyways, I'll go ahead and read the description / the story. Ever since he was a kid monster, Mike Wazowski, once again voiced by Billy Crystal, has dreamed of becoming a scarer. To make his dream a reality, he enrolls at Monsters University. During his first semester, he meets Sully, once again voiced by John Goodman, a natural-born scarer. Sully and Mike engage in a fierce rivalry that ultimately gets them both kicked out of MCU's Elite Scare program. Yeah, I think I got that one word right. To make things right, Mike and Sully, along with a bunch of misfit monsters, will have to learn to work together. So again, I really enjoyed Monsters University. Definitely in my top favorite Pixar films. I remember getting very excited when a sequel to Monsters Incorporated was announced, and later on, it was announced that it was going to be a prequel. Seeing the trailers, the first look at Mike and Sully as teenagers, and I remember seeing Monsters, Inc. in 3D a year before Monsters University came out. And yeah, and when the film came out, it didn't disappoint for me and my family. We really enjoyed it. Yeah, because, the story to this movie, we start off where, we see a young Mike Wazowski going on a class field trip to Monsters Incorporated. And it's really cool because Bonnie Hunt has a cameo voice in this film, not as Miss Flint, but as a completely new character. Let me see, by the name of, well, where was Bonnie Hunt? As always, I've got, yeah, here she is, yeah. I always got the tablet with me. Bonnie Hunt voicing Miss Graves, the teacher that's, leading the class, on the field trip and to Monsters Incorporated. And one monster that interacts with Mike and the school kid monsters by the name of Frank McKay, yeah, voiced by John Krasinski. And Frank tells the kids that, he learned how to be a scarer, going to Monsters University. And there's a mention of Fear Tech, Fear Tech's the best. And, Frank's like, okay, we'll see about that, MU is, see what you kids think on which is the best. And, MU is, and yeah, we learned that MCU is the best place for monsters to learn how to become great scarers. I don't know. I don't think we never see Fear Tech. But I think it's obvious that Fear Tech is very intense, probably. So that's probably a good case. But yeah. Mike at one point slips in and goes into the door that Frank McKay goes in. Even when, the kid monsters, they were blocking Mike's view, and one of them told Mike, "You don't belong on a scare floor." So that's one indication of, what is to come for Mike when he wants to become a good scarer. And, Mike experiencing what goes on inside the kid's room and seeing and witnessing Frank scare the kid. And, he is impressed that Mike was in there and he didn't even know. And, Mike was very brave at doing so. And Frank gave Mike his Monsters University hat. And that's when Mike says, "How do I become a scarer?" And we get the opening credits, in the 2D animation, like, in the first Monsters, Inc. film. And, throughout that, Mike learning, and thus he finally gets accepted to Monsters University. And when he arrives, first off, his roommate, well, you think that it would be Sully. Even in the trailers, it indicated that Sully was going to be his roommate. But no, his roommate is Randall. And in Monsters University, he goes by Randy Boggs, once again voiced by Steve Buscemi. We first see Randy wearing glasses, but Mike convinces him to, get rid of the glasses because, Randall has the capability of turning invisible, and, removing the glasses help, and it gives him a scary face, by squinching his eyes and so on. And I'd like to point out that in their college room, Randall has a poster that says, "The Winds of Change," which, of course, as we all know, he says that line in the first Monsters, Inc. film. You hear that? It's the winds of change. So that's a nice nod. And then Mike and Randall, they enter in the scare class, and that's where we get the introduction of Professor Knight, voiced by Alfred Molina, and Dean Hardscrabble, voiced by Helen Marine. And yeah, Dean Hardscrabble just, getting to the students and, saying to them, "What kind of a monster are you?" And especially how she treats Mike and Sully, a little bit later on. And thus, afterwards, we get the introduction of Sully, and, he reveals that he is a Sullivan, of course, and his dad being Bill Sullivan, the Scarer. And how Mike and Sully meet, well, at one point, Sully stole the Theater Tech's mascot, which was a monster-like pig, and, yep, that's how they first meet, and, at one point, the Fear Tech mascot pig stole Mike's MU hat. Ugh. And, a little chase that happens, and, Mike and Sully, and especially Mike, they catch the pig, and we get the introduction of basically the main antagonist. Like, I don't know, a lot of people, label him as, a villain in Monsters University, but, kind of, but still, he's just a jerk. And that being Johnny Worthington, voiced by Nathan Fillion. He's the leader of the monster group called Roar Omega Roars, and he brings in Sully, having Sully join them, and he, throughout the film, he gives Mike Wazowski a hard time, and recommended to Mike that he should join a friendlier and cute group of monsters, which being Oozma Kappa. And, and then a little bit later on, because Mike just doing his very best to, do good, and, a montage of him learning all this stuff, and all, the different scaring poses, like a gorilla, or, stuff like that. It starts off with Sully doing pretty good, while Mike Wazowski, not that much, but the more that Mike is learning, he gets better, and, it comes to Mike, and it just goes down for Sully. Even Professor Knight at one point said to Sully, one scary face does not, make someone scared, or stuff like that. Mike's got it this time. And that's when the final results, it comes to trying out the scare simulator. That's where Sully and Mike, they get a bit out of hand, and they at one point break Dean Hardscrabble's scare can, her prized scare can. And I think, it's things escalate quickly for Dean Hardscrabble. Accidents happen. The important thing is no one got hurt. And she tests Mike and Sully's results on how they can be scary. and telling them, I'm a 6-year-old girl or a 5-year-old boy, stuff like that. And Mike is about to, like, demonstrate, but, Dean Hardscrabble, he tells Mike to stop, I've seen enough, and she can tell right away as she says to Mike, you're not scary. And, she does the same thing to Sully, and, she just doesn't see Sully going on and how he has become a disappointment not only to this university, but to his family. And thus, Dean Hardscrabble disqualifies Mike and Sully from the scare programs. And, Sully at one point blames this on Mike. Like, Mike really had nothing to do with this. And, that's when at one point, Mike remembered something that, early on, and when he arrived at Monsters University, he was interested in the scare games, that, these scare games are, safe but not easy, stuff like that. And thus, this is his chance to prove Dean Hardscrabble, and he has his team, which being Uzma Kappa, and he needs one more to, be with the team. And thus, Sully joins Mike's team. Even at one point, Mike asked Randall to be a part of his team, but Randall had already been part of a team, which being Roar Omega Roars. Like, geez, Randall, like, kind of be like he starts becoming a jerk and like turning his back on Mike, even when they were roommates, like, they got along pretty well, just like literally. And so the members of Uzma Kappa, we have Squishy, voiced by Peter Sohn, Peter Sohn being an employee and director at Pixar, and a lot of people remember him best as the voice of Emile, from Ratatouille, Remy's brother. And there's also Dawn, voiced by Joel Murray, Terry with an I, voiced by Sean Hayes, and Terry with a Y, voiced by Dave Foley. And of course, as we all know, Dave Foley being the voice of Flick the Ant in Disney and Pixar's A Bug's Life, so Monsters University being Dave Foley's second Pixar film. And there's also Art, voiced by Charlie Day. Yeah, Art was a really good monster. We also find out that they're staying at Squishy's mom's house, Mrs. Squibbles, voiced by Julia Sweeney. Yeah, and Mrs. Squibbles, she gets a lot of good laughs, like, pretend I'm not here, and, coaching them when, she attends to the scare games. And one of the first scare games that they do, basically, like, this has to do with them avoiding, something that's toxic. Not, human toys, but, what they use instead are these, like, glowing pink, like, prickly balls, basically. Like, if you touch them, and gosh, Art, he said it himself that, I want to touch them, and he does. Basically, it inflates them, like, it makes them poofy. It's pretty funny. And at first, like, things don't go well for Uzma Kappa, because they have the entire team has to cross the finish line. But of course, the other monster teams, they succeed, especially Roar Omega Roars. So it seems like at first that Uzma Kappa has been disqualified from the scare games. However, one monster team cheated, and they're disqualified using gel, like having the gel on them, and if any of those, glowing balls hit them, then, it wouldn't affect them or anything like that. And one of the monsters that was a part of that team that got disqualified was George Sanderson. Yeah, we get a cameo of George Sanderson, and poor George, because wiping off the gel off his leg and, and one of the glowing balls touching his leg, and yeah, it makes his leg go, poof. George has been through quite a lot, and especially in the first Monsters, Inc. film, so Uzma Kappa is back in the scare games, but still, Uzma Kappa has a lot to learn, thanks to Mike Wazowski. I tell you, because he trained them very well on, how to avoid being seen, stuff like that, and it does take time. I mean, most of the time, Uzma Kappa being so funny and cute and adorable, stuff like that, look, a ladybug, make a wish, all that stuff. And Sully sometimes, because, throughout most of the film, he sometimes is being a jerk and, thinks that Mike doesn't have this, and especially for, helping and training them. And another scare game that they do is the library. They basically have to get, a flag, and they don't want to be caught by the librarian. And by the way, the Greek Council members of the scare games, the Greek Council VP, being voiced by Tyler Labine, and the Greek Council president, which I could tell, like, this, like, gothic monster, basically, that personality, being voiced by Aubrey Plaza. Yeah, she was good. Like, anything that she's in, she's good, and her personality. And the librarian, this, like, giant, like, tentacly monster, and, just wanting to keep things in the library very quiet. Like, if you make one creak on the floor, like, she gets pissed, and that shows when one monster makes a creak on the floor. And Mike and Uzma Kappa being very careful, and Sully just... it's funny. And, he can't take this. He goes and gets the flag, and, he tries... But it seems that they fail to get the flag, but Squishy gets the flag. He has this ability to be there or, like, sneak up on you, like, stuff like that. And so he managed to get the flag, so there's that. And afterwards, Uzma Kappa gets invited to a party, and it seems that, as of now, they're being appreciated, but that's when Johnny and Roar Omega Roars make fools of them. They're real jerks, and, they basically spill paint on them, glitter, flowers, and, as Johnny says, release the stuffed animals. And we see Randall, letting go of the rope. Like, geez, Randall, at this point, being, again, as I said, being a jerk. Like, gosh. And basically, Roar Omega Roars makes a fool out of Uzma Kappa, making them, feel embarrassed and stuff like that. And, Sully and, Uzma Kappa, they're just not sure if they can do this anymore. But that's when one of the members of Roar Omega Roars gave Mike an idea to do something, and Mike brings the members of Uzma Kappa with him, breaking into Monsters Incorporated. Yeah, we once again see Monsters Incorporated. They break in and they see through a window the monsters at their job, scaring and stuff like that. And I think, at this point, that this is where Mike and Sully start to bond. They have a lot in common, knowing the scarers. Well, the same goes for the rest of the members of Uzma Kappa, and the fact that Mike and Sully have collected a lot of monster scare cards, stuff like that. And even Sully, at this point, admits that he's been a real jerk. And it's pretty funny. They get caught by security, and one funny line from Art is, and I remember, because this was in the trailers, "I can't go back to jail!" Like, what was he in jail for the first time? That's the question. Like, they never explain it, obviously. And so they run away from the security, and Sully at one point has to carry all of the members of Uzma Kappa, except for Mike, starting with Squishy, then Dawn, and then Art. He's like, oh, I want a piece of that, and Terry, join in as well, riding on Sully. And of course, they get to the car. Squishy's mom drove them to Monsters Incorporated, and it was pretty funny. Another funny moment from his mom is, have fun, kids. I'll just be in the car listening to my tunes. And her tunes are like, rock and roll, stuff like that. It's pretty funny. Like, those are her tunes. She considers them her tunes. And, Squishy is just telling his mom to drive and go! Seatbelts, and, anybody want a candy bar, whatever she said. And, they, of course, get away from the security. And thus we get another montage of, Squishy's mom making them their own Uzma Kappa shirts and hats. And we see them succeeding, on the rest of the scare games, like one where, they have to avoid the teenager and scare the kid, another where they have to hide from like the flashlights, stuff like that. And it's pretty funny. Obviously, like for Randall, it's easy for him because he can turn invisible. And also Sully, he pretends to be a throw rug, and Mike pretending to be, like the planet Earth, like you spin around, that kind of thing. And Dawn, and another thing is, like a little bit of a montage of Mike teaching Uzma Kappa, their talents and stuff like that. Like Dawn, with his suction cups, he can, stick on walls and like be upside down, stuff like that. Yeah, all of the members of Uzma Kappa, they have talents, and they use those talents they have for, scaring kids, stuff like that. So, yeah, back to the scare games. The second to last scare game they do, as I said, hiding from the flashlights, etc. And the final scare game is the scaring simulator, the bedroom simulator, which is very difficult. And even Sully confronts Dean Hardscrabble about, about Uzma Kappa and being let back in. And, Dean Hardscrabble is getting to Sully, about Mike, do you find him scary? Stuff like that. And Sully should know the truth about Mike, if he really is scary. And Sully, he doesn't want the team to lose, and he doesn't want, to, hurt Mike. He doesn't want bad things to happen for Mike, if he is not scary. And Sully tries his best to teach Mike, dig deep! And, Mike giving it his best. And thus, we come to the final scare game with the simulator. And, each member from the team, which being Uzma Kappa and the Roar Omega Roars. And it's pretty funny because apparently Monsters University has its own national anthem. So that's pretty funny, of course, doing this, etc. So, as I said, each one member from the two teams, going into the two simulator rooms, starting with Dawn, then Terry, and Squishy, Art, and the last two, Sully and Mike. When it comes to Sully, he goes against Randall, and when Sully scares, the simulator robotic kid, when he roars, the vibration of his roar causes the other simulator room to shake and cause Randall to fall and accidentally camouflage with a rug that's all pink and with hearts. And Randall fails at scaring the simulator robotic kid. And that's when Randall's hatred for Sully begins, because the last line we get from Randall is, "That's the last time I lose to you, Sullivan." And that's the last we see of Randall in this film. And thus, it's now down to Mike and Johnny Worthington. Of course, Johnny, does a pretty good job scaring the robotic simulator kid. Ugh. And Mike, well, he's having, flashbacks, hearing the voices of those that told him that, he doesn't belong on a scare floor, he's not scary, and hearing Sully saying, "Dig deep!" And he gives it the best he can, scaring the robotic simulator kid, and you know what? He succeeds! Uzma Kappa wins! But a little bit later, Mike discovers that his setting to scare the robotic simulator kid was tampered with, and it had been set to easy. And he quickly discovers that it was Sully's doing. And, Mike was like, why did you do that? Did you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And him saying to Sully, "You don't think I'm scary. You trusted me and, you thought I was scary." And Sully, he says, "What was I supposed to do? Let the whole team fail because you don't have it?" And that was hurtful to say to Mike, but sadly, it is true. Mike is not scary. He can't be scary. And, Mike, at this point, he's had enough. And even Uzma Kappa, they're, of course, sad and hurt by this. And Squishy, he sets the trophy down. And, yeah, the trophy meant nothing to them, and rightfully so. And even Johnny and Roar Omega Roars, they're impressed by what Sully did. And they convince him to, join them again. And, of course, Sully is not going to do that. And it's like, oh, get out of the way and shut up, Johnny and Roar Omega Roars. And Sully, he goes to Dean Hardscrabble. He tells her the truth that, the team had nothing to do with this. This was all his doing. He cheated. And thus, Dean Hardscrabble expels Sully, telling him, I expect you off campus by tomorrow. You are a disgrace to this university and your family name. And right after that, Dean and Sully, they hear that someone broke into the door lab. And who could it be? None other than Mike Wazowski. Yep, he's going too far by setting up a door, and putting in a scare can, and, he is gonna do his very best. He wants to see if he can really scare an actual kid. And he tries, but unfortunately, he doesn't. He fails at trying to scare a kid. And what's worse, he's in a cabin with a bunch of other kids. Not just one kid, but a lot more. And I think it's like a cabin with a bunch of school kids, school field trip, stuff like that, And Sully, he makes his way into the human world, almost getting caught by the police. They come in, and Sully, he does find Mike, alone by the river. And, a very emotional moment where, Mike, he thought, by doing this, becoming a good scarer, he could be somebody. But, again, he's not a scarer. He doesn't have that in him. And even, confronting Sully that, that he clearly has that in him because he's a Sullivan. And even Sully comes out and says, that, yeah, I'm a Sullivan. I act scary sometimes, but most of the time, I'm terrified. Yeah, because we find out that Sully is actually terrified. And, why he didn't tell this to Mike, well, they weren't friends at first, and yeah, that's understandable, but it was at this moment that, yeah, it was the right time to tell Mike. And afterwards, the police, they're still on their tail. They make their way back to where they entered the human world, but unfortunately, Dean Hardscrabble shut the power off to the door, and as she says, until the authorities arrive, no one goes in that door. And yeah, and that's when Mike has an idea in order to, for there to be power and to get back to their world, enough energy, is to scare the police officers. And, Mike convinces Sully that he can do this. And, from phase 1 to phase 2, scaring the police officers, like, moving back and forth, like, having the curtains to, move, and a record player playing, and a doll, going, "Mama," up to when they knock over those beds. And just a little peek at the officers screaming, and even say Dean Hardscrabble notices that the red light to the door is almost coming on. Yeah. Mike and Sully are this close to scaring them, and that's when Sully comes face to face with the officers and lets out a roar and scares the officers. It causes the scare cans to, to fill up, and of course the door activates. Mike and Sully, they quickly go to the door, and an explosion happens. And it's at this point where we see the look on Dean Hardscrabble's face that she's lost of words of what she just witnessed. And, she even asks them, "How did you do this?" And Sully, all he has to say is, "Don't ask me," because, ask Mike. This was his doing. And it's pretty sad because, unfortunately, Mike's Monsters University hat that he got, like, it unfortunately got destroyed from the explosion. And the authorities step in, and who are the authorities? None other than the CDA. Yeah, we finally get an appearance of the CDA, including number one, which being Roz. It's pretty funny. You know, Squishy asking them, you know, what's going to happen to Mike and Sully, and Roz saying, that's for the president of the university to decide. But remember, we'll always be watching these two, always watching. And thus, the next day, the members of Uzma Kappa find out that Mike and Sully have been expelled. And, you know, but on the bright side, Dean Hardscrabble was impressed with Uzma Kappa and lets Uzma Kappa be part of the scaring programs. And also, at this point, Dawn is engaged to Squishy's mother. Yeah, because they got together right after Uzma Kappa won the scare games, the final scare game. And, you know, Dawn, he's trying not to make this awkward for Squishy. You know, don't think of me as your new dad. Think of me as your brother marrying your mother. You know, we're brothers that share the same mom. Like, not helping, Dawn, not helping. And so, Mike and Sully and Uzma Kappa, they say their goodbyes, and Mike's telling them, you're the best group of scary monsters I've ever known, however he said it. You know, a group hug for them. And Mike and Sully, they're this close to going their separate ways. But Sully realizes that, you know, they need each other. And even Sully telling Mike that, you know, he's not a scarer, but, you know, he doesn't have that in him. But what he does have is, you know, his teachings, you know, however he said it. And it's true. Mike is an excellent teacher at, you know, teaching those who, you know, how to be scary. Like, you know, what he did for Sully and Uzma Kappa. It was amazing. Even Dean Hardscrabble stepping in one more time and, you know, saying some nice things to Mike and Sully and telling them that they did something that was impossible. Surprising her. Even Mike, you know, he, you know, said to Dean Hardscrabble earlier in the film that, you know, he wanted to surprise her. And, you know, she was like, surprise me? I doubt that. But, you know, near the end, he did surprise her. Yeah, both him and Sully, they did surprise her. And afterwards, Mike and Sully actually get jobs. You know, there's a hiring for, you know, mail delivery guys. You get my point, yeah. Delivering mail and stuff like that. And we see that their boss is the Abominable Snowman. Yeah, the Yeti. Once again, being voiced by John Ratzenberger. So, you know, he was in charge of, you know, the mail carrying, stuff like that. And, you know, and mentioning about, you know, a crime, you know, of being banished, stuff like that. It was pretty funny. And then we get a little montage, you know, pictures of Mike and Sully, you know, the different jobs they have from, you know, being cafeteria, you know, workers to being janitors, up to when Sully trains for Monsters Incorporated, and he successfully does so, becoming a scarer of Monsters Incorporated. And of course, as we all know, he would become the top scarer. Even we get a picture of Sully shaking hands with a young Waternoose. He has an afro and a beard. That's pretty funny. Even Celia makes an appearance, but only in pictures. Like, there was like a napkin, I want to say, where it had her lipstick and her phone number. And thus, you know, Mike and Celia, they become a couple. So, yeah. And thus, right before the movie ends, Mike is about to enter the scare floor. And, you know, Sully, you know, asking Mike, you coming, coach? And Mike saying, you better believe it. And thus, he, you know, steps over, like, the yellow-black line, you know, like, do not enter the scare floor. And thus, he enters the scare floor. Yeah, what a great way to end the film. And more on the funny moments, there's one Monsters University student, which is a slug, voiced by Bill Hader. He's late on the first day, and as he says, I can't be late on the first day, and thus, you know, he He's running as fast as he can to his class. And, you know, when the credits finish, we see him again. He arrives at his classroom and, you know, yes, my first day! And we see a monster janitor informing him, you know, the school semester, like, you know, is over this year, blah, 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 you know, you missed it. And, he's like, great. And thus, he runs as fast as he can back to, I guess, you know, to his home. What a great way to end the film. They did a pretty good job saving that for the end of the movie. Like, whatever happened to the slug? Did he ever make it to his class? That's the question. And we see what happens. I love Monsters University. I know it's very mutual for this film. There are those that don't really enjoy this, you know, they're not really into it, but there are definitely those like myself that really enjoy this film, and I'm giving Monsters University 10 out of 10 stars. That's right, 10 out of 10 stars for Monsters University. And what about you guys? What do you think of Monsters University itself, and what did you think of my review? Leave comments, and give this review video a like, as always. So, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Monsters University. More review videos coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I'll see you guys in the next video/review. And happy anniversary to Monsters University. Take care, and peace out.